Hey, Silas here. So, problems occur due to how we define X rather than what X is. That's something that I realized while going through some tough times in my life, and it's something that has helped me just kind of navigate the different things that I think of in the world, and I think it does fit if you really think about that. We'll have more on that on the side, but with this situation that just happened, I just want to go through a little story or just a little recounting of what happened with these last couple of days. So I've been making some content on YouTube and blogging and things like this, and a bit of a political junkie. So I've been following that rather intensely, a lot more than most people I think do on average. It's kind of like I'm a political fanatic in some way, but mostly focusing on American politics, having lived there for most of my life, most of my adult life, like teens and high school, middle school, college, and then back and forth from then on. So I've kept in focus with that. If it is of any importance politically, I would be closest to defined as an anarcho-capitalist, and that is coming again with problems occurring depending on how you define the X. With the anarchy part, that's just somebody who thinks, in the way I'm using it, is somebody who thinks that we shouldn't have a system where you have a leadership class, a political class, that is above the laws that they set for people. It doesn't mean you can't have rules, doesn't mean you can't have hierarchies, doesn't mean they shouldn't be legal systems. That is all there, but my general problem with the current systems that we have with states is that you have a political class of people and people who take control or vote for, select people and place in this political class that has a monopoly on legal violence over a given area and people. And there is a general understanding that once you're in that class, once you're favored by the people in that class, you are above certain laws that the general public is subjected to. So that's with anarchy in that kind of sense. It's not chaos, it's anarchy in that sense. And capitalism is just people should have some sort of social protection and evaluation of private property rights. So that's private property of your physical body, the actions that come from your physical body when you act onto something, the results of that, whether positive or negative, should be to the individuals that actually did that. So that's the aspect of it. So those terms already are defined by other people in different ways, and certain problems can come from somebody just having that and just had an experience like that when discussing a certain point with this recent murder of Charlie Kirk that I'll get to in a bit. Well, yeah. So I'll kind of just go over it this way. I've been following this thing, and I have this kind of idea when something happens, I like to wait 24 to 48 hours after, unless it is something that I feel like if I say something immediately, or if it's something directly affecting my life, where I can be like, okay, I need to make some statement on this, where hearing from you or me talking about it, me putting something out there, will actually change what happens significantly if I speak on it immediately. In most situations, if you really think about it, if you wait 24 to 48 hours before making some significant statements, you probably have found more information about that given X to give you a better understanding or a more informed point of view on it. So that's kind of what I was thinking with this. But it wasn't even the Charlie Kirk thing that I was watching. I was watching that stabbing that happened in Charlotte, South Carolina, where there was this Ukrainian woman, Iryna. I'm forgetting her last name. She was just like, I heard the news of it. I hadn't actually seen the thing. I saw the video of her coming in and taking the seat, and this man in a hoodie with dreads like I have was sitting behind her, and he kind of cocks his head, gets up, he pulls out something from his pocket, which turns out to be a penknife. Adult mentality required with this, stands up, and there's a shot of him looming over her, and it cuts off there. And there was an explanation of what had happened with it. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm starting to see the reaction and the things going on with this. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of not some evil that went with mind. I understand evil exists. Whatever you want to define evil as, which is, I think, people doing stuff that is intentionally bad. I think most people who do things that you might consider bad, this will become important on, in general, they're doing things that they actually think this is a positive thing, and due to how I define any given X, I might have something that I think is positive but is negative for you. Like a simple thing is like, if I think winning a sports match in a team when I play American football, if I think winning the game is positive for me, I will do things that I think are good, including like trucking people, including like tackling people, including like other things that are involved in that, that for the opposing team is not a positive thing. The opposing fans are like, that person is doing bad stuff, he's beating my team. But to me and my fans and my team, we're doing something good. So that's in that sense, but even when it goes to other spheres, I think that kind of applies on that. So this person, that action, I don't think there's a mentality where someone's like just does that, stands up, does that, and then says that is a good thing. There's no, yes, they say he had mental issues, but even with the mental issues, it's, anyway. So I was like, I don't want to see that evil, and I just following the reaction of what was going on with that incident, and I'm sitting there scrolling through X and other social medias and seeing the commentary and just thinking, okay, why are people taking these parts and not those parts? Why are they reacting like this and that? And yes, they're talking about the George Floyd thing and the comparison of this and what the reaction to this. And I was thinking, okay, this is kind of a major thing. The visuals and the things, those things do matter. Like appearances matter. We are visual creatures. The perspectives on the things we're matching as like, okay, why can't these people understand what these people are seeing this? Why can't those people think this? Or if you just cut it off this way and you point out the people in that sense, I was kind of thinking, like one of the things I was thinking was people talking about, why don't those people help? Why don't those people do something? I'm like, I don't know if they even noticed what was happening. And then I saw some other videos, some people talking about showing other still images of after, shortly after, when some people did come to her aid. But regardless, I was like, different things was like, I don't know what I would have done in that situation. I'm a relatively big guy. I've got like, but still, would I have noticed? Once I actually noticed and what was happening, I don't know. So I don't know what I would have done in that situation. But I'm scrolling through and seeing that, and then all of a sudden I hear that Charlie Kirk had been shot. And with that one, I'm scrolling through, and it just comes out the pictures there, and I just see that. And the second I saw the video, I was like, okay, that guy's done. And the visuals, some of y'all might have seen it. It's stuff that can't be unseen. And so that was my experience of seeing that incident, and then from then on, just having a certain level of concern. I just stayed up for hours after, just following the tracking, and okay, he's in the hospital, he seems to be doing okay. And then the final announcement came out that he was gone, and seeing people already starting to do the immediate reactions to it, and me just thinking like, okay, this is another thing. Like since then, I've been collecting and listening to other people that I think are respectable in some of these things, or like hearing from them. They give actual information and different points of view that I might not have. And for some time I've been wondering, should I even make political content anymore? Should I just focus on artistic things? Should I do other things that are might be more less controversial in certain senses? But I was thinking, no, okay, because in many cases it was social issues that would happen, then a few other people who I kind of agree with on certain aspects of their points of views would say things in a pretty much similar way that I would say them, and I would think them, and they would have a lot wider of a platform. So I was thinking, what is the point of me with my small, measly little reach focusing on this when I could do something else? So regardless, I'll have a different post probably with all those things in there. But I want to go back to the story, and I'm thinking one thing I can do is tell stories from my point of view and personalize them and add an aspect where I'm telling a story about my experience, my lived experience, my point of view, because I shouldn't assume that just because I've lived something, seen something in a certain way, define an X in a certain way, that somebody else sees it in that way. Somebody hearing it from me with my personal story might have some effect on someone, and that is one thing that I think I appreciated about Charlie Kirk, and I think some people don't necessarily understand, is you can pick out certain aspects of his life, but one thing that was admirable, even though I'm also a religious, as I mentioned, a anarcho-capitalist, so I'm not for voting and participating in the state and things like that, yet he was someone who advocated for that. He was also a very religious man. He would talk about that a lot in his work, in his efforts, and he would actually have that belief. So even though I may disagree with the actual way he conveyed some of the things, I can understand and appreciate that it was something that he truly believed in, and he thought he was doing something good, and he had the courage to go out there and actually speak out on these things. So I'll just give a bit of a story, just because recently I've been reconnected with one of my first, probably my first friend in America. I was a kid of diplomats and moving around to different countries. Got to America right before sixth grade. I was taken to the school in upper middle class DC suburbs. Upper middle class. I think we could say that it was one of the wealthiest counties in the United States of America. It took some time until I I kind of started realizing this when I was playing American football in high school and traveling to other schools in the county, and then definitely when I went to college in West Virginia, that I realized like, my experience in high school was really not normal. It was more like the TV sort of popular TV show, but regardless, so I had that experience. I got there, and I think the teachers and the administration were like, "This is a school where it is mostly white, and the white people, half of them were not even like multi-generation Americans because a lot of international organizations, so we have first-generation people, and one of the kids happened to be a African American and happened to be black, and I think that played a part with them being like, okay, let's have him take Silas around school, and I'm glad they did. I'm glad there was some racializing, if there was any there, into that aspect where he did that, and we became really good friends. And it was a really good introduction to what the United States of America was compared to some of the concerns that I had. Like, I remember one of the main concerns me and my brother had at moving was we were wondering what are the prices of gaming consoles at that time. My parents might have gone to Zimbabwe or the United States of America, and due to the exchange rates, for some reason, Zimbabwe had cheaper video games, and that was as much as we knew. And then it was back then, it was in the 90s, and it was in a sort of time when we had very old imagery and ideas about what the United States of America was. I remember seeing some KKK stuff burning crosses, and I thought it was going to be those wooden paneled vans and cars, and there was some of those, but that was a lot older and was selective of what you're getting from it. So Kid was an excellent introduction to what Americans can be, and recently we reconnected on social media, and we've been having conversations about different topics, specifically with race, with me being more sociopolitically on the right of the American political what's the thing called political spectrum, and he's more on the left. But we care about each other. We know each other from childhood. We can have conversations. So we're having conversations, exchanges of ideas, exchanges of point of views, trying to understand where we're at on certain things. Certain things we agree, certain things we disagree. But he recently shared something that some of y'all might have seen, might leave a link to it somewhere, where there was one kid who had a video gaming channel, I guess, and he opens Pokemon cards, and he has this thing where he came on, and I'd seen this before, but he shared it to me with this guy who's like, I'm 6'7" on Instagram, and he kind of watches videos and comments on them. So anyway, he shared this to me, and I'd seen it before, and it's this guy just talking about like, this is to such and such person from the Navy. You know who you are, and I'm just ad-libbing here. You know who you are, and you thought you could come onto my channel and say these slurs and not get any consequences for it. And hello, I'm consequences. Then he talks about how he researched and found out who the person was. He tracked his information down, he happens to be this person who said this was in the Navy. So he contacted the Navy and was like, okay, those people will fire you. It's like, I could contact your family. I could send this to, that you're coming here calling me slurs, to all the other black sailors or black naval men, naval shipmen. I don't know what level of the Navy he was in, who you serve with. I could send this to your church in your small town that you're from. And it was sending that, and so he was sending that with, okay, what do you think about this? And we had a bit of a conversation about that. But one thing that caught my ear towards the end of what that guy said, and I remember when I first listened, I thought of sharing with him. I was like, nah, this is not something I will share with him, but he shared it with me anyway. That shows how we're kind of like mentally on point. He said something, that guy said something about how, oh, so when you came and called me slurs, you're going to be in an experience where now when you're working in a manual labor job with no future, and some teenager comes to you, like working in an Amazon warehouse, and some teenager comes and talks to you about what you did, like why you're here, you can tell him like it was because you called somebody slurs and whatnot. And to that, I was thinking, one of my best friends from college, I met in West Virginia when I went there. Recently, when I went back to the States, I went and visited her family. She invited me there. She's been really cool to me through ups and downs that I've had and whatnot. Our start might not have been the greatest one. She keeps saying that when we were in graphic design course, I would steal the computer that she would use and whatnot, but she didn't talk much back then. I was kind of involved in my football and whatnot in my group. I had one friend there, but we became friends towards the end of college, and really good friends once I actually left college. But regardless, so she could have used that and assumed like, okay, this is the first Kenyan that I'm meeting, African that I'm meeting, and this is how they all are, and just brush him off. But my experience from also getting to West Virginia, now living in the suburbs of Washington D.C., having a different point of view of what it's like to go out to the countryside of West Virginia in the United States of America, hills of West Virginia, that's like hillbilly country and whatnot, closer to the Appalachia sort of areas, that kind of idea. So I'm like, okay, I didn't get the burning crosses here, but maybe I'm gonna get them out there. And sure, there was some racist people there, but nobody was stopping me from doing what I'm doing. Most of the people were really open to me. They were, oh, I'm really down to show this person what he's into. If I was interested in the things that they were doing, they were welcome to me. I even had a further experience from some of the kids on the American football team who were from like the inner city areas of Washington D.C. and that was my first experience also of really meeting some of them, because when you were in the area, when I was in high school, it was like upper middle class, more white area, more well-off area, and I knew Washington D.C. was right there with like being the murder capital of the nation. And then one of our friends from college went home to D.C. area over like a Thanksgiving break, and he was gunned down with just this violence. And like, I remember people in college in West Virginia asking like, are they going to catch who did this? Because later on I found out in West Virginia, everybody had guns. People hunt. All the houses have guns. People have guns since they were kids. And we were talking to some cop when we were down in Wheeling in the city right below. And they were like, okay, when's the last time somebody was shot? It was like domestic violence and stuff like that is still there. And like, it was like 4 years ago. That was the last time there was a shooting in that whole area. But in D.C., when my friends were kind of explaining to the people in West Virginia who had lived in that countryside that my friend's killer would not be found because he was probably like the third person shot that night. Or like there's other people shot that night, and this is a regular type of thing. And they couldn't really like get that. They were like, how can somebody just get gunned down? This guy that we know just get gunned down, supposedly in his home, in his place when he's out with his friends, and the police don't find who did it. It's like it's such a common thing there. So there was a lot of things and experiences that I kind of experienced here, but regardless, it's a long way of saying that my friend right now, she had the same kind of degree that I did, graphic design. I went on to do animation. I'm doing other things, and like I'm traveling around the world. I had the background and privilege to have that in my life. But she's a really amazing person, and she just hasn't been able to find work for different circumstances in her field. Like she finds some work here and there, does some freelance here and there, but she's been working at an Amazon warehouse. Right now she's working in that kind of jobs. And for this person who was supposedly technically oppressed, people in his comments were like, yeah, you're brave and stunning, and oh, you show that person and whatnot, talking about how this is some rough sort of situation to be in, yet they were belittling this person, like working this menial labor job is something that's so beneath that person, yet that person lives in a sort of environment, living at home, making a living by just being online, talking about Pokemon cards and video gaming in an air-conditioned place, having people deliver, like there's probably people at Amazon warehouses who deliver stuff to him, but for him that's such a menial labor job that is so below him. And it was just like a weird sort of situation that I was wondering, like, why would this person just be belittling and showing off and brushing off something where somebody I really care about is just a genuinely nice person? So who is more privileged in that situation? The guy who can just sit in his room, make videos online, probably make a decent living from it, playing games, opening Pokemon cards and whatnot, being able to be called a word and be able to marshal these systems and controls to enact this action on deplatforming someone. And so my friend and I had that conversation, and he mentioned that, but I also talked about how I'm not necessarily against being able to do that. In fact, that is why I think we can exist without states, because that's how we deal with stuff. You should be able to be in a situation where this person said a word to me, and I don't want to deal with anybody who shares a word with me, who says a word in a certain way. I personally don't. Freedom of association is a key thing that I'm also for. I should be able to say that if somebody says a word, says a slur, I shouldn't have to deal with this person ever. That's okay. But I also think that if somebody says, if this person happens to be born a Negro like I am, then I shouldn't have to deal with that person whatever. I don't think they should be a government or a state or a politician that I can vote for and say that because I as a Negro want to deal with certain people. You have to force them to hire me. You have to force them to associate with me. You have to force them to do things for me. I don't want that system. Just like I want somebody to say that if somebody happens to say a word that I don't like, I shouldn't have to be able to force a government or a system that I have to deal with that person. I have to associate with that person. That person has, like, I have to make things for that person. Freedom of association, yet we live in a system where there is those kind of things where some people can say certain things, some people can do certain things, and due to their preferences, make a government and a system do things to them. And now, that word that's said to that person, is that a word that justifies what that person did, going and getting that person deplatformed? Now, I don't know if this person was actually deplatformed. I don't know if the military actually got him and was like, okay, because you said this word, somebody, we're going to take you off of the military, we're going to fire you in a, what's that word where they're dismissed? It's not dismissed, really, I can't really think of the word right now. Discharged. Not gonna like discharge you for it. Maybe he's actually worthy enough of the thing. He's also assuming that all the black sailors will also be offended and not just think, okay, this is just banter and whatnot, or this person's still valuable enough. So there's a lot of assumptions and things that I don't know that are going on with that. But that word, why did that person think that word? And can you think of any other people who have any other group in the world, let's just focus in the United States of America, that you can say like one word to them, maybe the CUNT, see you next Tuesday word to women in a certain way could be taken a certain way. But that is a level of power and privilege to have a word that you can say, and by that word you can have other people do certain things. Now, bringing this back to Charlie Kirk in a way, the words that he said. Before we get to Charlie Kirk, I want to bring this back to Iryna, because you want to say like, okay, this person had a mental issue. This person was crazy. But that person also did that action. Killed this girl. Killed this young lady. Killed this young woman. In a way where after they did it, like I said, once I watched the Charlie Kirk video, I had also seen some other things of another video of the guy who walked off. So he walked off, there's blood dripping off his knife. Someone on the front of the bus was like, hey, you're losing blood. And the guy is like, no, I got that white girl. I got that white girl. Now, when I heard that, I don't know if that means that he targeted her because she's white. That could have just been a discriminatory thing. Like, I got that blonde girl, or I got that blue-eyed girl, or I got that girl in the hat. Like, I think it was more like that, but just like, that's a common thing. Like, here in Kenya, you just say Mzungu. Like, I'm like, oh, no, like, someone might be like, oh, like, I'd be like, oh, no, you're Mzungu. That's like, that's that white person. It's like, someone's like, oh, yeah, that's a black person. Like, I got that black, I hate the black girl, So I think that was more descriptive. I don't know, we still don't know exactly what that guy was thinking on that whole situation. But then, he also says, like, this is a video that I've seen. This video might be off. If this is the wrong video, I will apologize. I will do some kind of addendum. But I think this is a confirmed video that the audio was there. And I don't know why the audio on the front thing had, but the audio on the back camera didn't have. So this could be something that was added, but not. But then he said, like, she called me a nigga. Now, why would somebody say that? Like, I don't know if this is an edited video, if it is the actual video, but if that is what the person actually said, why would somebody, even if they're crazy, say, and that's what I think is kind of a crazy thing. In my estimation, it is kind of crazy for you to think that somebody saying a word to you, one word, 7-letter word, or the 5-letter version of it, if they're not of a certain phenotype, if they're not a certain American descendant of slaves or whatever, then all of a sudden, that justifies you violently attacking that person. Because if people were saying that the words Charlie Kirk was saying, now first of all, what are the actual specific racist things that he was saying? What are the specific hateful things that he said? I've seen people say that he's spewing pure hatred. What are the examples that are provided of what Charlie Kirk said to justify what happened to him? If words are that powerful, then if you even say that is the case, why would this person, crazy or not, claiming that that word being said would justify, like, what would justify Iryna being murdered in that sort of way? Why would that person think to say that, even if somebody was just making up? Why is it when there is a situation of violence between a black person and somebody else who is not black, who's not a Negro, who's not African American, comes up, there's often that question of what did the person say before that? And it's not, did the person insult the person's mother? Did the person talk about the person's like honesty, or did they challenge them? Did they threaten them? It's normally like, if that person said that word, then the violence after is justified. Why is that? What is the power of words in that kind of sense where people say it is justified to behave in a certain way? What are the things that Iryna could have possibly said to actually defend it? And I think part of what makes me hopeful is people avoided speaking about what Iryna was happening because it was indefensible. What we saw there, regardless of what kind of situation we're like, it's crazy to me that somebody can watch that video and think, because this was a blonde white person, I can't relate to that person. That kind of collectivism, that because they're in that kind of out group, like they are these other negative things that I've had an experience. This is something that humans can do. But I just saw a girl lose her life, her blood fall out, and that's a fellow human. But the fact that most people were assiduously avoiding that question, avoiding discussing that, was because they understood that was an indefensible. There is no system, so it's okay, that person's crazy, that must be it, this person's crazy, or we just avoid talking about this. Then the Charlie Kirk thing pops in. All of a sudden, it's convenient. We can now focus on, oh, that's a gun situation. Okay. Oh, this person is more of a political activist. Okay. No, this is something that we can go back to more comfortable ground. We can now start taking sides and start saying, maybe he did this, maybe he did this in this way, maybe if he hadn't done this, maybe he hadn't said this thing in the past and it's out of context thing about guns like 2 years ago. We're going to focus on a snippet of what he said 2 years ago out of context, with him not talking about how, like, okay, we need increased security, we need fathers in the homes, which is a regular thing that he talks about when he's talking about family situations. He himself is a father. He's very attending to his kids, to his wife, and that is part of a core part of his message. We're not going to focus on how that is like 99% of this, or 90% of the stuff that he talks about. He always brings it back to Jesus, always brings it back to family. In that kind of sense, things that I personally don't agree with. I'm a-religious, so I don't have that experience. I did have that background, so in a way I can kind of understand this sentiment. Even though I don't agree with the particular foundation, the particular premises that he's speaking about, like go to God, vote for the government, they will help you in that kind of sense. That doesn't necessarily speak to me, but the sentiment of wanting people to improve, whether you agree with the words that he uses, is a different kind of situation. But to pick out that kind of part and not talk about the aspect that he also talked about, this family, his father's not in the house. When we go further to the man who stabbed that monster who stabbed that woman, the mother has apparently talked. Now, I don't know, she could be a widow. But the father hasn't been mentioned. His brother also has some altercations. He has 14 issues of arrests. The mother's like, he should be in jail. Somebody should have taken care of him. Why not the father? Why not the family? Why wasn't that dealt with at home? Why wasn't that inculcated into him that way? Was he not in the schooling system that apparently the government is really good at, like raising kids and socializing kids and whatnot? What's the system? Where is the father that? Why is that not discussed when that is a key thing Charlie Kirk brings up on the regular basis, which is an issue in the African American community? There is a lot of childhood violence, adverse childhoods by kids being beaten, and where's the peaceful parenting talk? Why is that not something that's focused on? Why is it not focused on the benefits and positives of having a man and a woman who are in some sort of agreement, whether it's married under whatever religion that you believe in, but just having some sort of agreement for some kind of stability in the home? Why isn't that more of a focus? He's spoken about that a lot more than he has anything hateful that somebody might say. It's pure hatred. What is purely hateful about that? Is it because people themselves have bad relations with their parents? That to them to say like, okay, he was a father, and that doesn't really apply to them because they don't have that experience. I don't necessarily get that part, focusing on that. Then the increased security, he's also talking about with the guns. He's someone who's familiar with guns. His friends are familiar with guns. They have guns. This line that from CeeLo Green in Outkast, Babylon, I don't know what song it was, but he has this thing like, we out here yelling about gats, but they made them shits. They got them shit that'll blow out our back from where they stay at. And that is one of the things that has me a bit tense, where I'm thinking, people are talking real grimy about the government, but part of why I dislike states is because of how the way they use force. Like, and part of also why I am cognizant of certain people, like if they think white people are as evil and violent as they are, then why would you be instigating that group in that kind of sense, like poking the bear, just waiting, like be violent? And bringing this back to poking the bear right now, with the solutions, what is going to happen in this solution? I have enough trust and faith in Americans, my experience, my lived experience from the Americans that I've known, traveled around to different places, followed the politics, been a literary creeper and whatnot, been making some content. I personally remember when I first started blogging on Rantathon, when I first started making videos, I was even at a different level. When the blogging was like, can I really talk about these things? Am I going to get caught? Like, I'm my self-importance in that kind of way, like, is this something that will get me in a negative position? Like, no, eventually I just posted stuff, it was okay. The YouTube channel was something else where it's like, okay, I'm putting out my face, talking about words, talking about more political topics, and wondering, oh, will this get me kicked out of the country, or not be able to get a visa, or will people get in trouble and whatnot? And they said, no, just get the stuff out there. First things started coming when people would comment and be like, people are commenting, I'm taking a lot of things personal and whatnot. I got over that. And in that sense, like, it kind of relates to and admire the courage that Charlie Kirk had and the courage that other people have. And I was recently talking to my in-law about how even if I disagree with somebody, like, we're talking about religion, and there was a time when I was a lot more like atheist, anti-theist and whatnot, and we were talking about how even though I don't agree with that stuff, I still appreciate people who I think who define something like, I have this belief about the world, about a way for you to live the best sort of life, heaven for eternity. And I'm not just going to keep that as a secret to myself. I'm going to make sure that I live that in my day-to-day life, and I'm also going to go out there and proselytize and get the people that I care about, the nation that I care about, the communities that I care about, the families I care about. If I see somebody hurting themselves, I will go out of my way to speak to them and try to tell them what I think would be better for them and live that in my life. I'm not forcing them to do anything. That's a different situation. So when Charlie Kirk was going out there and speaking about what he thought was good, I can understand that and appreciate that, even though I disagree with the content. In some ways, even though I disagree with, like, Karl Marx, I still think there is some sort of thing where I can kind of say, like, this guy, for whatever reasons, thought something was positive and went out there and tried to, like, realize that and spread that word out. He might have had selfish reasons to do it, but still, that is something that I'm thinking, like, yes, I can still do things. There's still things I can share. So in that kind of sense, I can see why that is something to appreciate, why that is something to put out there, why that is something that you can do. So with Charlie Kirk going out and doing that, and then the aspect where he advocates what is going to be done from it, and I think that people who are attracted and value someone like Charlie Kirk, which is something that I think people on the political left don't seem to be understanding, is you might disagree with a lot of the things that he does. You might be so much in certain bubbles and introspheres, and this is a similar thing that I realized from being in college in West Virginia, getting out there and be like, wow, these people live in these small towns in the hills in West Virginia that reminded me a lot of being in the countryside here in Nairobi, Kenya, where I was like, the only difference is there's paved roads and electric wires and brick houses, but the people and the mentality is kind of the same, where it's like, there's no reason for them to really know anything outside of their town. If you're never going to drive out of this, like, 500 square kilometer area, why do you need to know about other countries? Why do you need to know about other states? Why do you need to know about other cities if everything you have in your life is provided with you right there? You can live and die right there happily. Like, why would you need to know about other things? That makes kind of sense. But when they first met people who from outside there, most of them weren't generally open to it, and they were open-minded in certain ways, but there's still like a thing where it's like, if you move to a certain area, you normally adjust to that place because that is that place, and that was understandable. But I left there and I went back to the city. I went back to the suburbs of DC in that upper middle class area, and I realized there was also bubbles there. And one of the differences with those bubbles in those areas from the people who have traveled, going from like different cities and different places, or meeting people like me, who I'm a kid of diplomats, they might meet me and thinking, oh, I know Kenyans. But I'm not an average Kenyan by virtue that my parents were diplomats and I was born in France and I moved back to Kenya for a few years and I've been living in America most of my life. So if you know me at that point, you probably don't know what the average Kenyan is, if there is anything like an average Kenyan. So regardless, but there was an aspect where those people who were living in those areas had a point of view about the world where their bubble was enforced in a different way. In the village, in the small towns in West Virginia, they kind of knew. They're like, we haven't been out of here. This is all we need right here. This is all we know. And there was a level of unawareness, you could say ignorance and that kind of stuff. I think it's more like unawareness because they had everything there. But the difference with, I noticed in the suburbs of DC was because there was an illusion or a simulacrum of actual internationalness, and some of them actually were international. They moved to different places, but if you move to certain neighborhoods and certain areas in certain classes and whatnot, in different locations, like if you went to a five-star hotel in every continent, in like 20 different countries and cities, you would find a similar sort of environment because it's tailored to you in a certain way due to the class and the artificiality of it. So there was an aspect that reinforced the bubbles there because they were ignorant in a way where they believed they knew what the rest of the world was like without actually having that lived experience, which is why this initial story that I had from the start of my friend from that area, who still lives in that area, he might have had experiences out of that area, college and whatnot and things like that, but sharing a video of this guy who probably was in a city, I assume, I could be wrong with that, but not having the understanding of how people in other parts of the world, in their own country, in their own states live, and that disconnect there because they were thinking, okay, I know this person is this way. And I'm seeing that with this Charlie Kirk situation. People are like, I know this person is this way. I know this person is evil. I know this person's word said this kind of way. But with the poking bear, with the solutions that I'm trying to see here, trying to wind this up, is I'm thinking that what's going to happen from the Americans that know, from the experience that I had, from the people that I know, from different political spheres who actually get to bother with, and this is not just America, this is something that I've tested in the rest of the world in my travels that I want to focus on and platform more and be more like somebody who goes out there and actually speaks to people. That aspect that is so unique about the United States of America, that freedom of speech, that enshrinement of that importance of being able to talk, to use words instead of moving that S to the front there and using the sword. That is so important. That is something that I think that has been inspired, that I've been inspired to do. And I think the people who are attracted to Charlie Kirk were more attracted to that part versus the military, versus the support for the government, support for like voting and things. Yes, that was a big part of it. And I think this is something people on the left don't necessarily understand. Is there is no equivalent on the political left I can think of in the United States of America of what Charlie Kirk was in his activism, in his personality, in his entrepreneurship, in his relationships. I don't necessarily see something like that, and I think there is a disconnect where they just can't see that. And some people are celebrating rather quick in certain ways because to them they actually define the X that is Charlie Kirk off of these snippets, off of these base things, off of these filters through other people and not actually experiencing who the majority of that individual is. If you want to say that person who stabbed that person in the actual stabbed Iryna shouldn't be judged off of that one thing. That was somebody going through a mental issue in that situation. And yes, you can discount the 14 other arrests and other situations that he's had and say you can't just judge that man off of that one thing. Then why are you judging Kirk off of like 0.00001% of his statements and ignoring the vast majority of other things that he's done? Then I'm thinking most of the people who actually value him will be more moved to carry on in his example and increase the ability to actually talk these things out. Yes, it's a tough time to think of, and I can completely understand why some people are being outraged by this. The Iryna thing kind of going through. I don't think people on the left were really understanding how that meant to people. And then the Kirk thing comes in. It's also 9/11. There's just things happening. And one of the things I'm thinking is like, nothing about the United States of America has changed. And this is also one of the things, like my friend in West Virginia, due to working at this place, she has really tough hours, like night she gets home at like 2 a.m, has to sleep, whatnot. It's really tough hours. So she's somewhat political. She understands how political I am. Sometimes we talk about things, but we're mostly talking about art and other things in our lives and whatnot. So I tell her what's happening with this. She didn't know about the Iryna thing, so she watches that. She didn't know about the Charlie Kirk thing until I explained what Charlie Kirk was to her. She's more on the political right, but she wasn't really active in that kind of sense. But she starts seeing that, and she starts also noticing the ghoulish reaction to it. So that was something that she was taking in as well. Even my sister has some political aspects, but her also being a younger than me and also being a female, of course, her experience in the United States of America was also different from the things that I've seen in certain senses. So it's been kind of interesting hearing about her. So she came and asked me what my thoughts of Charlie Kirk were because she wasn't familiar with him. She's not as political as I am. So regardless, but so with them, there's majority of the world doesn't know who Charlie Kirk is. Majority of Americans probably don't know who Charlie Kirk is. Majority of Americans who even think they know who Charlie. Yeah, so the storage on my phone kind of cut out. Should have checked that earlier. I was could have found a way to probably edit this in, move to the right position, edit it in, and just get it. So anyway, what I was saying was majority of the people who I think even know Charlie Kirk, know of Charlie Kirk due to the way that we take in information when we don't necessarily know people, but we are different people to every single person. Like even I could just mention these aspects about my really good first friend in the United States of America, probably one of my most recent friends in West Virginia. They don't know stuff about themselves. They think of me in a different way due to the experiences that we shared together and the thoughts that we've had. We don't share every single aspect that we have with people, even with people that we directly know, like my sister. There's a lot of things that recently I've been getting to know more about my sister because I'm also taking steps in my own life to just know more about the people that I know instead of just focusing on exterior things. And I will probably be doing that more, even continuing to do this content, trying to bring other people in, have conversations with people, just like how Charlie Kirk was doing, going out and appreciating that's something I can value from him, that he was going out and saying, I have these views, this is what I believe, let me go out and try to understand what other people believe, define that X, understand that X. Just because we can understand somebody's definition of a given X does not necessarily mean we have to accept and agree and empower and carry out that given X. And that is one of my objections with the state, with some of the things that people advocate, saying, okay, what is a solution? Should we use direct violence? Heck no. Hell no. And I don't think people will do this. There might be a few people who do that because this is something that is outraging people. It's not going to be like Summer of George Floyd where people are going to go out in the streets and do that. And this is the thing. Some people are trying to compare some of these situations. There were some objections to comparing the Iryna situation with George Floyd. And I'm just like, first of all, the cultures and the peoples that these groups are in don't react to certain things in the similar way that you might in certain ways. But adding to that aspect, there is a noticing that I've been doing is why do the people on the political left, especially when it comes to Black Lives Matter, why do they rally around such questionable character people? Where you compare the life and lived experience of George Floyd, Trayvon Austin, Hands Up, Don't Shoot with Michael Brown, which is something that is just really put me off from that. It was a complete lie. It was found out to be a complete lie. Recently, the friend of Mike Brown, we might call him a friend, I don't define someone like that as a friend, but I think they would define each other as friends, came out and he was the first one who came out and said, yes, it was Hands Up, Don't Shoot, went and told Michael Brown's family. So Michael Brown's family blasted or took that information that he had told them and then went out and told the media that, then they ran with that, and then it came out that it was not real, and they were like, okay, it has the ring of truth or whatnot, or similar thing like with the Russiagate, or it has the ring of truth, so if it's not real, it's something that rings true to the thing, it raises awareness of the situation. He was recently shot dead in that same hood that he lived in. I remember going to different hoods, visiting some family friends. My friends in college took me back to their hood in Pittsburgh. Also went to visit one in Baltimore with a really good friend. Also need to reconnect with him. And was welcomed in those neighborhoods, in those areas by those people because I went in there with people open to kind of understand this is your lived experience in the United States of America. Just like when I went to the small town villages areas in West Virginia, I was welcomed by those people because I went in with the friends who took me into those places and also loved to bring conversations over those people. But there, why pick people like George Floyd with that questionable background? He was engaging in some crime, which you might consider a crime. I think the state with fiat currency has already issues with the state and whatnot with the money, but we had counterfeit money. He was somebody who was taking the fentanyl, and then he had that situation where a cop came, what's his name? Darren something, I'm even forgetting the cop's name, but he came in, he was a white cop. They previously had worked together as bodyguards and whatnot, but there was an Asian cop, there was other cops of other races. So if people think that was a racist situation due to the dynamics going on, even though there was no name calling, there was no inference right there immediately that it was race was a part of the situation, they took that and ran with it. If you think that was racist or racial, but you don't think what happened to Iryna was, then I'm questioning where you are mentally on that situation. But why pick those kind of characters, those kind of questionable situations? Maybe it's because there's normally under 15 actual shootings of cops, non-black cops, or I think it's cops in general, on black males. Maybe that is part of why you have to pick these examples which are not, but even if you were, why would you pick such questionable people in questionable situations often, and at the same point not be able to realize that when it comes to someone like Iryna, who's recently literally just somebody who came in, sat there, and that happened to her? Why doesn't that speak out to people? Why don't people see that with Charlie Kirk, regardless of his political disagreements that you might have with him, his socio-political leanings, he was a family man who had, for all intents and purposes, seemed to really care for his wife, seemed to have loving children, was there for them, was somebody who was appreciated by other people, just like people are saying, like George Floyd is appreciated by people, like and Stephen Jackson and other people who were celebrities and whatnot. Stephen Jackson was, I think, a friend of his, and he was a basketball player. He was also a relatively big commentator on basketball since he played. But they're talking about how he's a good person, like whatnot. There's murals of him all over the place, and then now you had the thing where it's like Elon Musk and some really wealthy person said, okay, I'm putting like a $1 million fund for $10K for each mural of Iryna all around the world. But so that George Floyd thing was all over the world. It's a global event. Even here in Nairobi, Kenya, there was murals of George Floyd. But his character was questionable. The incident that he lost his life in was questionable. Yet he was lionized. He was deified in this kind of sense, put up as a Christ-like figure in some kind of sense. Someone like Charlie Kirk, who had a belief in Christ, lived his life in a Christ-like way that he defined, used words, went out there, found out people that he disagreed with and wanted to talk to them, use words. He's someone that I discount that, not think about that. So there's a weird aspect of that. But coming back to what I was talking about, with my disagreement with using violence. So I don't think people use violence because I think people appreciate what Charlie Kirk is, and my lived experience from talking to Americans and having that valuation of the freedom of speech, and people generally understand that speech is better than using swords. Speech is better than using violence. So there is an aspect of that I don't think it will descend into just like reprisals and whatnot. I think this fervor that's happening right now, that people are rightfully to be outraged, will die down, and some more sense will come out of this. When it comes to using the proxy violence of the state, and as I mentioned, as an anarchist, my estimation of this with my favorability for the non-aggression principle is, I'm just thinking, when you use the state, what you are saying is, I have this personal preference for this kind of thing, and I want other people, usually men who have guns and other forms of force, to go out, and because I think this is positive for myself and maybe other people in the world, that these people with guns need to set this policy where they will take those guns and take that force to take money from other people, transfer it to other people, or force other people to do things that I think are good for me, other people, and for them. I'm not positive for that. That is proxy violence. If you sit around and call someone like Charlie Kirk a Nazi and other people, when Nazis in Western lore, the Western world, are probably the one justifiable target to wage war on, then you are setting up a situation where it is constantly justified that the war that the United States of America, it's like the founding myth of the West, is World War II. If you of the modern West is World War II. If you advocate that these people are Nazis, we are in a fight for democracy, then you are setting up a situation where you're setting up these people as the justifiable villains that you can fight against. Why is it that with Project Ukraine, there has been a steady effort to soften the Azov battalion, who are actual neo-Nazis, who were actually partnered with the Nazis in World War II, who still go out and have Nazi symbols, and they have the things, they have the flags, and the salutes, that is still a regular thing. Why was that sanitized if people didn't understand that it's sanitized? Because we villainize these people so much that you even have the stink of it, you even have like a reference to it, you are somebody that should be hated. So that's what people have been doing to the political right for quite some time. So you are engaging in proxy violence. If you also go to the situation where you say like the state needs to do this. So when you talk about the state, when you think we should go to the government and advocate for different things, and this is why I'm concerned with some of the governmental reactions. Yes, a lot of people in the government right now are really good friends with, were actual personal friends with Charlie Kirk. Not in the political aspect, but as an individual. So there are some concerns with what might happen in the political aspect, because I think if they start setting up rules and laws and things based off of this, those things could be used by other people in negative ways, just like after 9/11, certain things were set that have changed some of the nature of the United States of America in a negative way, that have been taken away from what they were ostensibly put in for, which is a common thing in the state. But I don't think much changed about what the United States of America was on 9/10 of 2021 or 2001. When 9/11 happened, everything about America and the world was still pretty much the same, besides our perception of it and the actions that we took after it. Similar to right now, 24 years later, nothing about the United States of America really changed. On 9/10, before I heard about Charlie Kirk, and after, which is evidenced by like my friend who was still at work. She hadn't heard the thing. She could have still been at work. I could have not told her. There could be a myriad of reasons why she was just still living her life. So most of the world is still just going on, but the perception of what has happened has changed. If we go to the state to do these things, you are also supporting the same people who use different policies and systems to create a war in Ukraine, that Project Ukraine, to create the NATO, the encroachment and things, and the continued support anything we need to do, and discounting the things that Russia has. Russia is evil, Putin is evil, so we're not going to listen to Putin and whatnot. So we're not going to take any concerns of what he's saying about what his concerns, fears are about the encroachment and the things. We can just do these things to them because we are the people and powerful. We're in the right. We use our force to do this. That situation happened. That thing has descended into just an utter mess of just people constantly dying, to the point where Iryna's mother, I don't know if Iryna's mother was already living in the United States of America, but she's been here with her mother. Iryna had to leave that country, come to the United States of America. Once she got her papers, she got a job. That's an excellent thing. Model immigrant and whatnot, which is majority of the immigrants, even though like the criminals, like you're saying, Charlie Kirk had the, what percent of Charlie Kirk's things were incendiary and negative, that you can define that is who Charlie Kirk is as an individual. So what percent of illegal immigrants, specifically illegal immigrants, need to be committing crimes for you to say, okay, illegal immigration in general is a negative thing? There's another dichotomy that needs to be read separately. But she comes to the United States of America, and due to that system, she gets in there. Now again, due to the political system, with people who were voted for, put in those positions for DEI reasons, and don't have to have the right judicial things, but people trust it. Okay, the judges can do this. The system is set up. I have this mandate from the people to do all these things, and release this person who has issues 14 times, and then he's put in that situation where the system has, people say the system has failed him, but I don't think the system is supposed to work. The system is working as is. These are the common things that you expect out of a state system. But he comes out. So you are supporting, expecting the system and the structure that resulted in the Ukraine war, resulted in Iryna having to come to the United States of America. Probably her father has been consigned or something, or her brothers or anything weren't allowed to leave the country. Maybe have been put through that meat grinder that's going on with the aggressive attrition that Russia is having, that they were going to win. So they did that system. They came here. The same system, same people, the same structure, the same state structure that released that monster to put in that horrific situation, to do what he did to her, end her life in that kind of way, where people are desensitized to the situation where they're thinking somebody else is doing it, somebody else is taking care of safety, somebody's keeping us safe, somebody's controlling us, somebody's helping this, somebody in the state, this benevolent being entity of the state is the one's going to keep us safe. Just like when my friend was talking about with that message, and he was saying, okay, I shared this message because I'm wondering, should somebody in a situation like this be subject to say that I should just accept people using slurs to me? Should I not have a situation where the people who have sworn to protect and serve me should also care about my mental comfort and not... I'm like, no. That is not something that is owed to you. So nobody should be responsible for your safety, especially as an adult. You're responsible for your safety and the safety of your loved ones. I am for people... I would appreciate people who help me for whatever reason. But I don't expect that from anyone, and I don't think I should be expected to help anyone else either, especially random strangers. Like, I don't understand that system. But when you have that system with the state and you expect that to come from them, people think, okay, that person's handling this, and then they start saying, I should be kept safe for this people. And I think there is a aspect over there that changes what America uniquely was. The things that are uniquely American, I think, was an aspect where people went in there and they're like, I have the freedom to pursue liberty. I want the freedom to do the things that I can do, protect myself, get myself, enrich myself, earn more, be more, rather than expecting somebody else to provide those things for you. And I think there's been a slow time when Americans have been going towards that point. And I think with the Charlie Kirk situation, there's also a similar thing there. People on the political left are celebrating, and I don't think they honestly believe the right is as violent as they are. Otherwise, they would not be celebrating as much as they are, because they would be like, okay, something bad's about to happen. But I think there's been an aspect of people on the political right who are just like my friend in West Virginia, who's rather moderate, but they're used to doing other things in their lives. They're doing other things. They have families, they have jobs, they're not as politically active. And with some of them, they've been thinking that people like Charlie Kirk are doing a great job of that. They're really good advocates. They're really talking out there. They see somebody doing that and they're like, I don't have to do that, because Charlie Kirk is going out there and talking to these college students and going to these areas that are just like 90% politically left, and where people on the political right can't really go and speak for decades. That was the situation. And now, no, at least a decade, I think. And then it kind of switched over when like now there's a lot more acceptance in that kind of situation. But the things have been going really politically left in the social sphere. That's been the more acceptable thing. Hollywood, the media, the schooling indoctrination complex, the ideas of that, where people are so much on the political left that they imagine someone like Charlie Kirk is an extremist, when from my estimation he's relatively moderate when it comes to like MAGA world and conservatives and Republicans. He's just a lot more courageous and outspoken about what he thinks, but there is actual right, further right than he is. I guess technically, with him being a narco-capitalist, I might be way far right, and it's like off the spectrum in that sense. Everybody's a commie leftist, to my estimation, from my point of view. But with Charlie Kirk, people people don't understand that there was an aspect, and this is something that I'm hoping, and I'm rather confident in, that more people will be having the reaction that I'm having. I've been seeing more people like this who will say, like, no, we are not going to take the example of this person. This is something that also with Jesus said. Some people can take the wrath that Jesus had, which I think the only time Jesus was violent, which was pointed out, was when he was talking about the money usury in like the temple, and he flipped the table. Well, not flipped the table. But so that was another aspect that just speaks to me, like the fiat currency. There was a really aspect of people controlling money in that kind of sense. I don't know if it was more because of fiat currency or if it was more because it was in the church when they were doing this. But regardless, you can take that aspect of the wrathful God, or you can take that aspect of the God who forgives, the God who speaks, the God who goes out there and talks to the people, converts people through words. And I think with Charlie Kirk, having his example in that kind of a sense of the person who talked, the person who actually goes out there and talks, I think a lot of people who were thinking Charlie Kirk is doing it, people like Charlie Kirk are handling it, so I don't have to speak. I don't have to talk to people in my personal life. I don't have to talk at work if something happens. I don't have to come out and say that this is how I believe when I'm in my workplace, because I might lose this. The people who thought, it's somebody else is doing that, so it's okay. I think a lot more of those people will start speaking out, and people will start realizing that these people are just normal, average people in their lives, and they're not these evil beings, that these evil, violent beings that would just drop down and collapse. And I want to be part of that. That's something that has helped me in my life, not just politically, but just in general, trying to understand people, trying to talk to people. And regardless of where I've moved, I found areas where some people might have disagreed with me for reasons that are outside of my control. But it's been majority people being peaceful, people being open. If I express interest in what they think and believe and live like, and want to partake in that and share aspects of my life with them, majority of the time people have been open. And I think that is something that's going to come from this. I don't really know what much else to say right now. So I think I'm just going to sign off right now. I will probably have more on this. I've taken, like I said, I've taken some notes of people that I've listened to, and I might have something more scripted with that and Anyone But K shirt, because I think I want to do something for Charlie Kirk. Not sure what I want to do with Iryna, because I was thinking of doing something with that, but that's just tied into this whole thing. But thanks for listening. And that's what I can request, is just try to listen. Problems come due to how we define X rather than what the X actually is. If people had a better understanding of who Charlie Kirk was, I don't think these problems would have actually occurred as much as they can. Charlie Kirk seemed at least to be doing some effort of going out to try to understand other people, and I think that in and of itself is something admirable, worth admiring, worth thinking about, and I've seen some people on the political left making some attempts to do that, and I think this is somewhat different. Trump was a political figure. He's like the God Emperor of the United States of America. He's kind of like a caricature of a human being, where when America dodged the bullet by him turning his head, I think the world would have been sociopolitically different if the world had lost Trump at that time. But from my understanding of who I think Charlie Kirk is and was and could have been, the potential that he has, to the political right in the United States of America, especially the more politically active one, which is more socio-politically out there and engaging, I think people are not quite understanding how significant of a person this could be. I don't want to say MLK, I don't want to say I don't want to start comparing, because I think he's rather unique in a figure due to the time that he lives in, the things that he was doing, the way the world is aware to see that the things that we've seen with what has happened, the information that's still coming in about the shooter and other, there's still so much to do, but this has been my thought. Realize that this might be a lot more significant than you might think it is. It might be less, I don't know. But let's actually take inspiration of what Charlie Kirk was doing while somebody took his life, and not be on the side, not take example to follow what the person who did that was doing. Rather follow what Kirk was doing, because I think he would still stand by his statements about the Second Amendment. He knew the risk that he was taking. I think he would still be somebody who would say that use speech, use words, but at the same point, you need to start recognizing that some people are like that man who showed up and stabbed Iryna, and are beyond your actual words. There's no words that you can say to actually explain and make these people understand. And there needs to be a point where you personally take that freedom of association, speak and talk to the people who you can talk to. Otherwise, you will make more space for the people who don't value words, who can't be reached with words, to go out and actually act. So that's it for now. Till next time, goodbye.